could be decent men in an indecent time.
What up? Welcome back to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and continue the Dark Knight Trilogy wave. Now, we already did the Scarecrow, so this time we will be taking a look at Two-Face, Harvey Dent, and leading our way to building the Bane collect-to-build figure. Now, of course, Two-Face was played by Eckhart in the film. We'll go ahead and take a look at this guy, see the pros and cons. But he does look pretty horribly scarred in the packaging, and we will go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you actually have an image from the film, like promotional shot. I'm not sure. I think this might have been like a poster that they sold at FYE, but I'm not actually sure. But it's a pretty cool image. I believe in Harvey Dent. Now, something interesting. On the back, you do have some information, and when you read this, like breakdown of the Two-Face character, it's actually more of a comic version of Two-Face. Of course, a long time history in DC comic books, one of the main Batman rogues. To me, it's rather interesting that they chose to go with this, because this could be used later on if you just change the images as just the backstory of a regular comic book Two-Face, which we have not received from McFarlane, so I thought that was pretty interesting. We'll add that to the collection. Now, he does not come with any accessories per se, but he does come with the torso of Bane, so we will be putting this away and taking a look at it when we actually build him. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. Now, first impressions, pretty simple, more realistic version of Two-Face, of course adapted from the film. Now, the backstories or the reasons why he is Two-Face are, of course, different from the actual comic book. In fact, you have different versions, but they usually don't stray off too far from that he becomes scarred on half of his face due to some criminal activity, and that he is a DA at first, like fighting crime, and he just goes rogue when he gets scarred horribly. Now, usually in the comics, it is acid that does this. In the film, it was kind of like fire, like he got burned. So they did take their liberties with it. And of course, usually in the comics, he's a dark-haired character. And of course, Eckhart is blonde, a little bit more blonde. But it is a film, so you're not going to get your traditional version of a comic book character, more, usually. But he does look pretty good, a simple suit body. Nothing too extraordinary, but he does look pretty good. Now, I actually do not own the Movie Masters version of this guy from Mattel. I had actually have him like on my wish list, like I want to pick him up, but I just never pulled the trigger on him. And I do own like the once again, like the regular standard Mattel version, which were like more like 5-inch figures. But I just didn't want to look too much in the storage to find them. So we'll have to go ahead and just take this figure on his own merits. But a pretty simplistic design, but it is accurate to the film. Let's take a look at the head sculpt. Of course, we knew this is where McFarlane is going to shine, which is on this scarred side of the head. Looks pretty disgusting. Has a little bit of kind of, I want to say gloss, but probably a little bit more satinish paint to the damaged side of the head, where it looks a little bit slimy, so that's a cool little detail. Of course, on the other side, you have the more human form of Harvey. Doesn't quite capture the actor's face exactly, but I have been rewatching, of course, The Dark Knight, And there is a couple of scenes where you can actually see where, like, if an artist paused it, this is where he would be referencing this sculpt. So it is there. I do think the hair is a little bit dark, and it could use like just a little bit of blondish highlights. So I'm thinking that on the scarecrow and on this one, I'm gonna repaint the heads a little bit, and I'll be showing those off when I do my Bane review. But of course, for what this is, which is a standard Harvey Dent Two-Face figure that people would recognize right away, you know, a regular consumer would see this and know that it is Two-Face. And altogether, it is a pretty nice sculpt. Let's take a look at the articulation. He looks down really well. Looks up really well as well, which is cool. I don't have to mod this. He gets a lot of good range looking up for some cool poses. You do get right to left. And then, of course, you can cock his head for some attitude or some aggressive stances. And then, of course, on the neck, if you look at the neck, it is also damaged right down the middle, you know, starting from the jawline and going down to the throat. So that's a cool little added detail. Moving down to the suit body, you got your standard tie, a little bit of damage on the left side of the coat. Now this did not transfer onto the sleeve of the jacket, which is kind of a letdown. But you know what? I may just add a little bit of damage on my own and a little bit of like reddish paint like the way he has. And I will show that in the Bane review once I do that custom work. But all in all, pretty cool design. Let's take a look at the waist articulation. You do get pretty nice side to side. You get the full tilt-a-whirl at the waist. You got a lower waist swivel. And of course, an upper chest swivel. So you can twist them, get them in some action poses. Now, something interesting is that this underbody is not hollow like the other suit bodies. This one does actually have plastic in there, which allows, you know, it just feels a little bit more solid. But the restrictions are there where it is a solid form. Now, surprisingly, he does have a crunch, you know, more than usual, which is pretty awesome. Just let the tie ride forward and you could get him in that almost L crunch. And then he can lean back really nicely. So all in all, some pretty cool articulation for a suited body. And of course, you know, McFarlane's always trying to advance the articulation, advance the technology, and the execution of the figures, trying out different things, which is always appreciated. Now let's take a look at the shoulders. Same thing as the Scarecrow. He doesn't have a traditional bushing in that socket, but the jacket is soft and it actually acts as sort of like an in-between between the coat and the shoulder. So you do have a lot of cool range, up and down a little, front to back, a little bit more, bicep cut, double jointed elbows, and it does collapse on itself, and they actually look pretty clean. And then of course, moving from the shoulder of the left arm down into the hand, there is no damage, so I might look into working on that to add a little bit of scarredness to this side. And then moving into actually a sculpted wrist joint, which is hidden really nicely, and you still do get the full articulation, hinging and swivel. And of course, this hand does have his traditional coin pinched in between the fingers, which is a cool little detail. And you know, of course, that's going to add to some toy photography possibilities. A pretty cool little added feature there on the hand. On the right side, the same sculpted out suit sleeve, moving down into your classic trigger finger hand. Now, this is pretty interesting because on some of the reviews I watched, they do say like, oh, it is sad that he doesn't come with a gun or a pistol, but we know that's Warner Brothers' fault. So like, why even mention it? You know what I mean? And why just cry about it instead of like fixing it, which would be like a lot more helpful. So he does have the trigger finger hand, and if you do look into the second munition gun pack from McFarlane, it does have a gun that actually resembles pretty much the one from the film. Couldn't find it exactly. I mean, it's pretty close. And there are kind of like two different versions because at first he uses like a more gunmetal, like snub nose gun. But in the final scene, it's like a more chromed out, like a little, the barrel's like a little bit longer. So since they don't show a gun change in the film, it kind of like, misleads you on which gun it is. But I thought it would be cool to add my own little detail and add some high chrome paint. And of course, the gun fits right into his hand. So that that kind of finishes it off without having to cry about it or complain about it. He does have his gun, of course, supplied to us by McFarlane. And this will be Harvey's gun. This is the one he's going to hold on to. Now, something that's also cool, I mean, if you'd like to do it, but I would say be pretty careful, and that is that you can pop out these hands if you would like, but you should warm them up. Be very careful. But you can put the fist hand in this hand. I actually did that so you could see how it looks. But these are from the Scarecrow figure, but they actually match perfectly. And if you didn't want him to have the coin hand, you could use the other hand that the Scarecrow comes with, which is a trigger hand. So that would kind of make you have two trigger hands, and you could have like a dual wielding Harvey Dent Two-Face, which would be pretty cool as well for some pictures. So that's always interesting if you would like to do that. But of course, having the gun in his hand opens up the possibilities of a lot of cool posing and figure photography. Well, let's go ahead and continue with the articulation. You do get the T-pose pretty simply. Can't really get any higher than that, but you can move his arms above his head. Got some cool range there. Let's go down to the lower body. Pretty stiff at the thigh swivel. You don't get much. I'm sure if you warm this up, you could probably loosen it up a little bit. But as I said before, if you cock the leg out, you can actually see a little bit more of the swivel that the hip has. He can kick up respectfully. Of course, this guy isn't, a karate expert. If he were to fight, it would be more of like a brawler kind of fighting. So he can kick up. He can also kick back respectively. Now, do not worry about the trunks of the slacks because once you put the legs back, they do go back to their original form. You can cock out his knee, and he does have that McFarlane hip swivel. Double jointed knees, pretty clean. Straighten them out. Let's check out the foot articulation. Now, this one is a little bit more limited than the Scarecrow, but you still get a nice up and down motion, right to left, and then a nice rocker and toe articulation. Before we go, let's take a look at the lower body. Now, he does have like the belt sculpted into his slacks, and when you go down like to where the zipper line is, it's a little bit soft. Like I wouldn't even say soft. I would just say it's kind of dirty a little bit. But something to look at that is interesting is that this is not the exact same slacks as the Scarecrow. Those were like a little bit softer, and they had that pinstriping on them. And these are like a little bit more stiff, and they have less like of a defined grain sculpt on there. But they still look pretty good, and they do have the folds where they should in the sculpt of the slacks. So not too bad, just for your basic body. Taking a look at them from the bottom, no tread and no identifying marks. Moving up the back, we won't look too much at this because it's just the sculpture of the slacks. You would have to raise up the jacket, but I mean there's, the back of the belt, and of course the white undershirt, but I mean that's, not really interesting. So that's like the case where the other ones are hollow, and like if you're not gonna see it, then what's the point? So I mean, it's kind of like the same thing here. But you do have nice sculpt work on the jacket, cool stitch lines coming down the middle and on the sides. So all in all, not a lazy sculpt job by McFarlane as usual. Moving up into the back, and you do get into that dirty, grimy, damaged half of Two-Face, and then you could see the hair on the other side. So, looking at these figures from the back gives me creepy vibes. I'm not sure why, but it just does. So, pretty simple figure. I mean, there's not too much to this guy. He is cool to add to the collection, and of course, McFarlane supplied us with his gun that I just added a little bit of high silver paint to give it some pop. But cool possibilities to pose. Before we go, let's just stand him next to the only other figure we've done from this wave, which is the Scarecrow. And they actually do scale pretty nicely together. So this guy's gonna be a lot of fun, easy to stand, some cool posing possibilities. And let's look forward to the next figure, which will be the Joker. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
But first, he does come with your standard black